Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But then Ricky will get lost.
Yeah, or Ricky won't know where she's going.
Yeah, let's turn one back on and we'll be good. Yeah, that's good. All right. Well,
You want to sit in the comfy
yeah.
chair?
Let me jump right in because I know that they told you that we'd be here till about 10:30 or so. Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what y'all must have thought when somebody said, yeah, we're gonna have a 7:30 a.m. meeting and it's gonna last until after 10. Yeah. Angie's trapped. So I've got a lot of stuff to show you today and a lot of kind of ideas and concepts to share with you. I'm running double computers, so I hope I can keep on top of this, but I am recording this. So if we do have any board members that aren't here, we'll be able to share that recording with them, and it'll kind of put the ideas that I'm sharing with you all on top of that presentation. So I always like to recap with what I heard over the course of the visit here. As you know, we kicked off 2 days ago on Monday morning here. A lot of really good things going on in the community, and the Main Street organization has been able to make a real positive impact. But then there was also some of the questions about, have we connected the dots with the citizens? Do people understand? They know what Main Street is, but that doesn't mean they know what Main Street does. And then also what we commonly hear with a newer program where you had a little bit of that program high from your launch, and then you've kind of trailed off a little in terms of awareness and involvement. So how do we move from there? The next thing that I always like to kind of hit on is some of the tools that you've been using. So this is the current logo. And in the grand scheme of things, you get a pretty good grade on this because it was actually designed by a designer, which is a lot different than a lot of Main Street logos out there. There are several concepts all going on at the same time in this logo. And I want to break that down a little bit. Obviously, you have your community name. Someone came up with the clever idea that go is in the name, so we decided to highlight that. Now, I'm not sure where we're telling them to go, whether we're telling them to go somewhere or go away. But go is highlighted, and go is highlighted all the time. That can potentially be problematic. This is a concept that I have used many, many times, but if you don't play it out and you don't make it mean something, what it actually starts to do is it starts to break down the way that you read the word, and it doesn't necessarily work for you. Then we have the heart. I asked a couple people over the course of the past couple of days if they realized that the heart was also the shape of Michigan. And I don't think that how many people knew that it was supposed to be the shape of Michigan? Yeah, there would be no other reason to have a weird, oblong, crooked heart if it wasn't supposed to be the shape of Michigan. So, but again, those are those things where sometimes when you design something, you design it with a certain intention in mind, but then if you don't walk it through and make that mean what it's intended to mean, then you end up losing that inherent design meaning. So again, it was a really good kind of direction, and honestly, it led into the whole love campaign. And I have to tell you, driving through the community and seeing Public Works guys with Dayglow orange shirts on, with hearts on them, there's some good stuff there. So I mean, don't feel like it's all bad, but it's also difficult to own a heart. The thing that's probably most problematic about the logo, though, is first of all, you can see that it says Main Street and it says Michigan. this logo was designed from the get-go to do double duty. It was intended to be the organizational logo and the destination identity simultaneously. And that can be problematic. But I think the biggest thing that I want you to look at is when you're trying to convey the identity of an organization, you are Main Street. That is your identifier. That is the thing that sets you apart from other organizations in your community. Look at how tall Main Street is in comparison to the composition of the rest of the logo. It's about 20% height. So you want to make sure that you have a system that allows you to say who you are, announce who you are, and it does kind of go into the same feedback that we heard from you guys. People know Main Street exists, but they might not understand everything that Main Street does. So from there, I want to introduce, this is kind of the basic concept of how we approach this branding toolbox. There really are four main elements or areas that we focus in on. The first is the color palette. Next, we select uniform typefaces or fonts, a consistent message, and then an approach to graphics. And I'm going to hit on all that stuff this morning. So to start with the color palette, it was pretty easy for you guys. I went through and I looked at all the different things that existed. When somebody asks you what your high school colors are, what do you say?
Blue and gold.
You say blue and gold? So there is a broad spectrum of what that blue and what that gold looks like. But at the end of the day, the most prevalent use of the blue is a really, really nice, dark, rich navy blue. You want to avoid royal blue at all costs. I will tell you that I put a lot into this work, and yesterday I was driving down back towards the hotel, and there was a car in front of me that had a, it was like, it said love, but the O in the love was the mascot from Plainwell. I know, and I was hot. Like, it got me, I was like, oh, come on now. So we know that those color variations and making sure that you land on a consistent color is important. As I went through, I mean, I noticed that there was even color variation that had been used over time in the Main Street logo. So being able to have good, solid, defined colors. But then the other thing that is extremely important to remember is when you are representing a vibrant downtown, you want more than two colors. Two colors can be very limiting, and especially from an organizational standpoint, if you've only got two to work from, we find that volunteers get tired of those two, decide they're going to add some spice just to keep things fresh in their own eyes, and you very quickly dilute your whole system. So what I've done is I've added 3 additional colors. I added 2 different tonal variations of that dark blue, and that's a really important thing to do when you're in a certain color family. Going lighter in the very same family is much different than just picking a lighter blue, because it might have more red to it. It might have, like, these are all color tonal qualities in that exact same navy blue. So it gives us a depth with our blue without ever walking close to royal. So that was important. And then the other thing that I did with your gold is I stayed exactly in the same place in the color spectrum where the gold exists, and then I moved it down into a different hue category. So I picked kind of a bricky red that exists in the same part of that spectrum. So what it means is all your colors are going to go together. They're going to feel right together, and it's going to be easy to use them as a base. And I'll show you how that kind of progresses. From that, I started to look at typeface, and I always like to look at the community and some of the things that exist out there. Pretty much anytime the city had invested in saying your name, it always appeared in a very similar way. It was always in a sans serif typeface. Sans serif means that it doesn't have doohickeys on it. That's the technical terminology. No doohickeys.
No feet.
And so with that sans serif, it's a really interesting choice, and I'm gonna nerd out on you a little bit from a design standpoint, but I want to show you that what I've done is I've selected 3 different typefaces in your system, but that primary typeface is a sans serif typeface. Now, many times when a community is designing a logo, they don't pick these. They decide their community is pretty, so they pick a script. And they pick the thing that is like the least legible as possible. Or they decide that they're old, so they pick papyrus, you know? And it's like, you don't have to go that route. The reason why sans serif typefaces are important in design like this is they're content neutral. They don't bring character to the table. So it allows your community to truly shape the personality that you want to convey. And it also creates enough variation that you can look very traditional when you need to look traditional, and you can look very contemporary and look like you've got this forward momentum when you need to look contemporary. So it can give you the best of both worlds because it's not carrying that character with it. The second typeface is a very, very heavy slab typeface, and I selected it because it has both a sans serif and a serif. And then the accent typeface is just I believe that this one might actually be called permanent marker. I'm not sure, but it's a handwritten style typeface, and it's used in an accent to be able to give a personal touch and feel to things. So as we start to connect those dots, the next thing that I always like to do is I like to look at what I call a word type. The word type is the consistent representation of your community's name. Over the past 20 to 25 years, as you have invested in your community, one of the elements that you have chosen to invest in frequently is this kind of arch design. We know that you just have moved one of those arches over towards the Welcome Center. There are arches that are seen on gateway signs. There's arched elements to parking signs and things like that. Now, it's a pretty significant half circle arch most of the time, but I simply wanted to tie into previous investment and be able to create this word type, this consistent representation about Otsego. Now, the other thing that you'll notice here is I chose an all capital instead of what was called title style that you had used. I really wanted the symmetry of those O's on each side. The balance of your name is something that a lot of communities do not have. So being able to use that to your advantage really gives you a lot to work with. And then some of the brand values. There were a lot of different things that we talked about. We talked about this reconnection with the river, where our relationship with the river has not necessarily been a strong one because of the role that the river played. You know, a lot of times rivers played the role of like an interstate highway. So communities, instead of engaging them, many times turned their backs to them. That's where they sometimes dumped their garbage, and that's where all the industry was connected to the river. But reconnecting with that is a vision that you all are walking down. I put paper mills not as much as the role. I mean, I know that you have an active paper mill in the community now, but that whole mill mentality, blue collar mentality, that kind of connected, determined, just kind of put your nose down and do it. mentality that I think is very, very valuable. And I think oftentimes this idea of a blue collar community sometimes gets interpreted as a negative identity when it shouldn't be at all. You're unbelievably friendly. I was really, really pleased at just how nice people were, and really how the experiences that you have here are really, really good. I mean, I had breakfast at Judy's yesterday, and I feel like I'm a changed man. And so being able to kind of connect those dots, the small town feel, the pride that people have in the community, and of course the Bulldog pride, I think all those things kind of tap in to this overall identity. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create something for you that would sit right on that edge between traditional and contemporary. I didn't want it to feel edgy. I didn't want it to feel like too out of the box so that it made part of the community uncomfortable. But I also wanted it to just look and feel very professional and very clean. So what I've done with this destination brand, and I'm going to start with this logo for downtown, is I wanted to create something that just started to tie together a lot of the concepts that you all were playing with. So what I'm showing is something that looks a little bit like this. Very clean, got that arched word type, gives us a composition that allows us to have that downtown modifier, this very simple phrase of feel the love, being able to take that idea that you've already introduced and actually turn it into a personal benefit on the consumer side. So it turns into an invitation instead of just a declaration, if that makes sense. Now, as far as this icon, I wanted to give you all this kind of stylized image. It's built up of 4 components. Those 4 components in my mind really represent 4 of the things that rose to the top. This blue collar heritage I just talked about, the Bulldog pride, the historic flavor of your downtown, and that potential with that riverfront reconnection. The other thing that it does, since nobody saw the Michigan in the heart, I just want to also point out it is a stylized O, so that's a good thing. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about it is that because of the way that it's designed, it has this forward momentum and this forward motion. Now, I want to give you a quick caveat here, because if I was you and I was sitting in the chairs that you're in, and I know that I'm a warm traditional community and I see this for the first time, it's kind of like, it feels kind of cold. I don't know that. I mean, couldn't we do like a lamppost, kind of thing? It's all in the way that we implement this and the way that we roll it out. So let me talk about some of the elements here. What this does, it starts to build the system that gives you this opportunity to have a truly versatile graphic identity. This system can work in one color, it can work in reversed, it can work in black and white. Knowing that it has a contemporary feel to it, you can also adopt destination brand variations that allow for you to have a more traditional image when it applies. So you can see what I've done here is I've done this Otsego downtown logo, but then I've also created a historic logo. And it gives you that opportunity, depending on where you are communicating, to have different kinds of messages. And I think that's really, really important. A lot of people think that a brand means one and only one logo, and that's the only thing that you look like and say anytime ever. And having a good brand system in a community is actually about having the right outfit for the right event, if that makes sense. And based off the conversation before the meeting, you guys know about right outfit. So, being able to have that versatility. Now, to me, this is where it starts to get fun. Now we're starting to go and use that icon to start to stitch together some of those concepts that you all have already been playing around with. So you highlighted go before, but you didn't necessarily do anything with it. So make that concept mean something. We've talked about the love. Now all of a sudden you can simply, with the adoption of a system like this, you can now own the word love. which is a pretty cool concept. So that simplicity can go a long way. And again, with the overall approach to design, it gives you a lot of opportunities to really kind of take this stuff and just make it yours. Does that make sense? All right, so let's put this to one side with this idea, this destination brand. And what that really means is we have this downtown logo system that the Main Street organization uses to promote downtown as a destination. But these tools are also made directly available to the business community. So as they're creating merchandise, as they're marketing their community, they have freedom to use this as they see fit. Because the goal is we need more than just the Main Street organization to build brand equity for our downtown. So you make that toolbox available to the business community. But we also need to think about this organization identity. And yeah, that's always funny. That's because it's not on my computer. So this computer looks fine. Organization.
One looks fine there.
Right. So with the organization brand, I wanted to keep the same icon because the same icon can do double duty for us. But I wanted to give us this system so that we can now put Main Street on the front burner. Anybody know where that background photo comes from? You know, it's a really cool way that you can just take different elements and textures from the community and kind of incorporate them in. And it's amazing how little details like that introduce this character. So from the Main Street identity, what we have is we've got a lot of different options, okay? So I want to talk you through some of these things because when I show you this, this is not really a slide where you as the board needs to say, oh gosh, I guess we got to pick which one we're going to use. This is like different size screwdrivers, okay? You're going to need these different tools at different times. So across the top on the left-hand side, you see this composition where Main Street is extremely prominent, brings it to the forefront. It's composed in what I call a badge design, which means it has a holder and it has a background, making it very, very easy for it to serve as a self-contained design. And the reason that's important is because as we're promoting our downtown, we're going to need to slap our logo on things. And then, once again, that's the technical term. Like, slap that Main Street logo in the bottom corner so people know who did this kind of thing. So you have a version of primary ones with your 4-color icons. Those will all be, you'll have 1-color variations of that top row as well. But it shows you that you don't have to have only 1-color variation. You can have that tool that's going to work. You go directly below that, and you have a composition that loses the icon. This is for smaller use. So if you need to put your logo in a smaller place, you have one that you can get more vertical height with that. And then running down the right-hand side, you actually have a set of logos that is a little bit more relevant outside of the community. So if there ever comes a reason where you're having to communicate about Main Street efforts that are going on here, but your audience is maybe regional or beyond, then you now have an opportunity to, again, bring your community to the forefront. But I very much see those on the right-hand side as being a secondary or auxiliary use. It's that kind of single-use tool that you keep in the toolbox, but you don't reach for all that often, but it's important to be there. Now, in addition to that, in the bottom left, you see that I've created committee variations and essentially assigned one of each of those 4 colors to those committees, simply so you can help people to understand that you've got this 4-point approach and this kind of holistic approach towards revitalization. Now, from there, being able to see how it might make its way into things like the business cards for the organization. You've got pretty good cards now, but the card it's got a ton of info on it. So being able to simplify some of that down and have this kind of nice, clean look and feel. Once you have that foundation in place, it makes it very easy for you to figure out how to roll new concepts in. So like one thing that we were talking about is the 5-year celebration. So now with this approach to design, it makes it very, very easy for you to just know what to do. You stop spending so much time negotiating in committee what an event logo should look like or what that event marketing should look like, and you're able to kind of have those things be a little bit more streamlined. Now, in addition to that, I always like to show different examples of collateral, how this might make its way out into different things, so you can see where being able to make products that consumers want. Many times, if you ask somebody what apparel they have that ties into their community, it's either going to be related to their high school or it's going to be what I call a car wash shirt. The shirts that are so ugly that you only wear them when you wash the car or cut the grass, because it has like 7,000 logos on the back of it, and somebody thought it was good to get it designed by a 3-year-old that has a shaky arm. So exactly, lots of Comic Sans. So being able to have things that people want to buy. There's another concept, and I always show this. I've got 5 kids, and my oldest is 14, and I remember when she asked me for a Swell bottle, and she asked me in the way that a person would ask somebody to buy them a car. And I could not figure it out. I was like, what is it? And she's like, it's a water bottle. And I'm like, why are you making such a big deal out of it? Well, it's because it's $45 for a water bottle. Like apparently it's double walled and it has a layer of fairies that keep the beverages cool or something, So it's an extremely expensive item. But the reason why I show this is because typically when we go through the process of thinking about logoed merchandise, we always end up landing on these non-branded, non-named products that we then put our logo on. And there's nothing wrong with that concept. But what we're seeing here is a completely different concept. It's called brand co-oping. So if there are certain premium brands that relate to the character that you're going for, when you put your logo alongside theirs, you actually begin to absorb some of their pre-existing value. So, if I worked with a region in Virginia that was trying to position itself as this kind of outdoor mecca. So we created a line of Patagonia vests that had their logo on it. What's a $150 vest? If we were making vests for a ton of people to own vests, we would have picked the $37 vest. But we picked the Patagonia vest because just a couple, just the elite, can start to spread this message and kind of share that value. So always think about that idea of brand co-oping. Whenever it comes into clothing and stuff, feel free to be creative, create things that people want to wear. Exactly. Like that's you want to create something that feels like a product that somebody would buy from a store, not something that you're wearing out of charity towards your community. It's honest. So you're starting to get the elements that allow you to be truly marketable as you tell that story. And then, I even went, this is the first time I've done this, but I went and I found like a ski style jacket. Because, you are the home of North America's largest downhill ski jump based off your city logo. So
Yes, we
with that, no, I think that any time you go through and you recognize that you have a magnetic draw that's pulling people through, and especially with Bittersweet, right? Bittersweet. They're coming through the community. So anytime you can find little ways that you can make that connection, it's just helping you to kind of capitalize on that market potential. Because, I mean, honestly, a person who's coming here to spend the day skiing, especially if they're a day tripper, they have a primary purpose, and that is to ski. So being able to figure out some sort of relevancy where you can carve some economic impact out of that person is important, and being able to have those different ways to show that relevancy. In addition, like going through, we talked a little bit about banners, and thank goodness, we did not jump the gun and work on this banner project. Thanks, Ben, for holding off for me. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ben.
You've got a dual banner system now. The dual banner system is you've got double brackets. They're a smaller size banner, which is really good because it means you can get more for your buck. The banners are in really good locations. I'm showing you a couple different designs. One of the things that I will tell you is on the main street, the banners are doing a pretty good job of helping to close in the space. Your banners in your community need to perform a very important function of shrinking the gap. So it's important for, as you introduce new banners, especially running down your main street, make sure that they're creating a rhythm and a repetition, not disjointedness. So a lot of times if I show a community multiple designs, they'll think that the best thing to do is have a different design on every banner, and it's just not. Like, you want to be able to stand in the middle of the street, and you want that rhythm to create this cone and just kind of pull the street in together. So I'm showing a suggestion where you would have a consistent community banner, in your case, on the street side. And then interchangeable banners that could be event-oriented or could just be kind of initiative-oriented that change over the course of the year on the sidewalk side. So it's a slightly different strategy where you have some that serve a little bit more of a more permanent place on the poles, and then you interchange the ones where now you have seasonal ones and you're changing the whole set. Then just also going through, and I wanted to put together a kind of an ad framework, and I took quite a few photos throughout the community, but I think one of the big things that we do whenever we talk about marketing a community is, as soon as a community starts thinking about ad design, they start making the list of every single photo that they want to include. And it's like, we have to include a photo of anything good that has ever happened in our community. And next thing you know, it is an unbelievably busy collage, and you're not really seeing things, and you're not setting that impact. So the main thing that I wanted to do here was I wanted to use it as an example, showing how you could connect dots with the headlines, the power of community, feel it, that really tying into that idea that if we truly believe that downtown is the heart of the community, this is the place that you go to feel connected. And I think that tied into a lot of the things that Mezzo's really, that messaging is kind of out there. That's why the photo really worked. But also this idea of having this dominant photo, a single dominant photo that allows a person to be drawn in. Now, I designed this as an ad concept. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and spend a bunch of money on print advertising and magazines and that kind of stuff. I highly recommend using local publications to advertise in frequently, right? But, if it simply makes its way into Facebook in this composition, there's a real big dynamic that your citizens deserve to see how your community is marketable, and they oftentimes don't see it. So simply creating a series of ads like this that you then share on Facebook, it does make an impact. So I think a lot of times people feel bad because they can't go and buy a full page ad in like a statewide magazine. It's like, well, that's okay. That's not, it's not do this or it doesn't work. There's some tools where this really can work for you. But I will say to you, as we go through, to me, where the system really starts to get super fun is with what I call event extension. So after looking at the colors, after looking at the typefaces and the different approach to design, it allows us an opportunity to go through and start to hit on the event and how do we preserve the individuality of the events, but also have the graphic identity of the events connect the dots in the people's mind, because if we don't do that, everything is self-contained. And somebody might have a good experience at a single event, but then it doesn't actually filter out into downtown improving or anything like that. So this is a picture of the current poster for the Riverfront Family Festival. And this is, once again, it is very well designed in the world of Main Street posters. Okay? But when you start to dissect it, and I don't want to be critical, but I'm using this to teach. You've got a vampire pumpkin, which makes complete and total sense. You have a scarecrow tin man, which also makes complete and total sense. You have fall leaves, makes sense. I'm absolutely digging the squirrels at the bottom of the tree. They look very happy. You fit your Love logo. You fit your Main Street logo. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of information on here. If I was going to evaluate this in I guess the major things that I would say is you have two concepts that I feel like I struggled with as I was looking at the logo. One is the typical look and feel of a fall festival. And a fall festival typically has certain colors that you would expect and that kind of stuff. So how do we handle the fall festival identity while also wanting to bring the blues in to connect with the river and have this be a positive experience that people can have with the river? So honestly, it is a challenge. It's a conceptual challenge. From a poster like this, I think one of the biggest things that I would say is I don't know that we need to feel compelled to put every disclaimer and every instruction on there. I think that you want to draw people in with this stuff and then send them to the website. So as you move forward over the next couple of years, have a little bit more confidence to maybe say less and drive people to the website. And Joel and I worked on making sure that we could get into the website on Monday. So I think that we've got that kind of figured out. And also I'll be making some recommendations to Joel from a technical standpoint on some tools that he might be able to use on the Main Street website moving forward. So with all that said, this is just a concept of what a logo might look like for that. I wanted to tie back into that kind of original Pine Creek name, that origin, and that's why I kind of featured the pine trees, even though they're evergreen and don't have leaves that change color during fall. But again, it gives you that opportunity to meld together that gold, which is prominent in the fall color palette, with the blues of your color palette. Again, this is a very, very simple recommendation, maybe just to get the ball going here. Now, I design a ton of logos. This next one might be one of my top 5 favorite that I've ever designed for an event, because I've never heard of Steins and Vines before. It's an awesome event. So what I did was I wanted to create something that kind of tied in to that and created this festival atmosphere. Again, using those color palettes, I did. This shows you that even though I defined certain colors for the color palette. As you get into that event extension, it doesn't mean that you can't add new colors. So I've selected a green, and the green is in the vines of the grapes and in the hops that, again, on the same tonal quality, it allows for additional depth in those event logos. The Pirate Poker Run, which is one of the coolest combinations of things I've ever seen. And so, again, all right, so here's the deal. I'm in an event committee. I'm going to do an event that has something to do with a pirate. So the first inclination is go out and get that clip art pirate, man. We need the peg leg, we need the patch, we need the sword, we need the plank, like we need the full kit and caboodle. And then parrot, yeah, everybody needs a parrot. Once you walk down the pirate road, it's sometimes difficult to figure out how to merge together the pirate and the poker, you know? So I wanted to go through and I wanted to see if I could find a way that I could simplify those two concepts down to kind of their symbolic fashions and then figure out if there were creative ways that you could merge that. So, you know, you've got the skull and crossbones, which you can see that simple symbol and automatically think pirate. You see your different suits of your card deck, your poker chip, all those different things. So there's actually a lot of graphically that can happen. And then once you use this kind of consistent logo system, once you design your poster, that's where your picture from your pirate can come in and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you can figure out a way to have a pirate with a hook hand, with a card hand stuck onto his hook hand, you've like won, you know, you have won downtown event marketing. So, create that consistency in the logo so that you can have that variation in the marketing. Does that make sense? Cool. And you'll also notice here that I did select a typeface outside of the family for pirate, but I didn't pick one that was called swashbuckler or a buccaneer or anything like that. That look, you know, I picked something that had an inherent character to it, but it also wasn't over the top because I knew I was going to have a crossbones. I knew that I was going to have those other things, so I don't have to try too hard to tie it in. Okay, this next one is so absolutely cute that it's killing me. When I heard about the pet mayoral election, I was like, this is like the cutest thing ever. Now, when you design a logo for something like that, you don't want to call it the pet mayoral election because a mayoral is a weird word. And then mayoral election sounds more like a procedure than it does like, so this is what I'm showing here. So then all of a sudden, you know, you've got this way that you can just very easily connect the dots with those different things and be able to kind of tie that together. Exactly. And, you know, movies at the museum, again, taking that circular concept, taking that color palette, taking those four components and tying them together into something that just kind of makes sense. I don't think anybody named this, but I did this logo for Otsego in Bloom, and this is really kind of focused at that push that you do to put the flowers out and that kind of stuff. But again, wanting to kind of set that tone for some of the expansion and growth that you could experience. And I heard you say autumn bliss, and so I wanted to, again, go through and just kind of formalize that as a thing. And be able to kind of take that and tie it in together. Now, again, with this, I used the golds and the brick red as the base, but then I also adopted in some browns so that it was that kind of appropriate autumn palette. Mud volleyball, you can have fun there, and look at that. Now your icon has turned into a volleyball. So, you know, being able to have that versatility is really important. And then I wanted to kind of tie it in with a similar look and feel, but I also really like the way that Hometown Christmas So you can kind of see that cleanliness. And look, you can turn your icon into a wreath. You know, so again, that simplicity of design starts to create this connectivity. And now all of a sudden, when you start to look at these events, even though they have very different feel, there's different stuff going on, they start to feel like they're coming from the same place. And that feeling like they come from the same place really is this foundation that you need to be able to create what we call brand equity, so that people hear Otsego and they hear downtown and they think, that's a vibrant place. That's the heart of our community. That's where cool stuff happens. So with that, I've been talking for 45 minutes straight, and that's what I've been able to do since yesterday. What are your thoughts? Does the general direction make sense? Does the concepts and kind of the strategy that I've started to lay out seem to work with some of the things that you guys want to accomplish? Right.
It's pretty cool to see the main
Mm.
all its variations and then how they all tie into the different event logos. Wherever you go, so that even after a while you're going to connect
Exactly.
the shape of the circle back to the Otsego logo.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you just picked up on that. For the most part, every single time I was kind of faced with a design decision, I mean, Riverfront really was the only one, Riverfront and mud volleyball I deviated from. But I wanted them to have an overall round composition. They didn't always have to be perfect circles or anything like that, but being able to use that roundness as a consistent design element, it subconsciously also helps to kind of connect those together. Well, and the other thing that I wanted to do as well is knowing that, you know, we had heard that the city is wants to go through a process, and honestly, I think that the strategy that we've laid out here, from a color palette decision, typeface selection, and some of those tools, in my mind, there's absolutely no reason that foundation can't jumpstart that process, so that as the city itself goes through the process, the thing that they're really looking at is, what should our graphic identity be? What should our icon be? And what should our message, once we get out of downtown and we're a little bit more community-wide, a little bit more holistic? So hopefully this will actually help to simplify and streamline that process, because you want to make sure that you engage the community. You want to make sure that the city has something that's theirs, and because of the size of your community, I would actually promote the idea of, as you go through that process, you want two main tools to come out of it. You want a community-wide logo that's not specifically the city's from an entity standpoint, but something that the city proudly uses because it makes them look progressive and like you have your act together. But then you also want a stylized seal. And the seal is not to market with per se, but the seal would be the update to this element, so that as you go through that, you now have something that you can feel pretty confident that designed seal could have a long lifespan. And I think that's one of the things that, from a Main Street perspective, you're going to be somewhat nimble and responsive to the market. And as you go through this stuff, I'm showing it put into things like banners, but I would not show it put into wayfinding signage. Because that wayfinding signage, wayfinding signage, parkage signage, that kind of stuff throughout the community. That probably should be more citywide, and B, I've started to lean a lot more towards less graphics on that kind of signage because the lifespan is so much longer that the last thing you want to do is paint yourself into a messaging corner by being too aggressive in what you implement and not giving you the room to adapt as the market changes. Because, the fact is, this might work perfectly well for everybody, and in 3 years, you might be a completely different place. There might have been funding streams that came open, streetscapes that changed, riverfront investment. Who knows? Like something that we think might take 15 years and then that ends up taking 6 years. And, so being able to feel comfortable enough to adapt as you change, I think is an important concept. And I feel like the versatility of this gives you that option. Any other thoughts or anything else that you feel like I need to hear?
We have lots for sale over here.
Mm-hmm.
If you and your family are interested in relocating, I've got a realtor for you.
Nice.
Our school system is
Nice.
excellent.
Nice. I have heard that about the schools. I have a lot of people that need schooling, that's for sure.
Thanks for promoting me as an agent.
Yeah. I like how
Scratch
you
that
have the
bit.
4 points with the 4 colors.
Mm.
I think
And insurance.
that being like on the website prominent so people know the meaning.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really important from a Main Street perspective to be able to tell that story. And I don't normally do this, but I also liked the duality of having those components from kind of a community side and then components from an organizational side. You could almost imagine that when you get on the website, if you dedicate a page to each of the 4 committees, maybe you switch out that background to that color of you don't want to overthink that kind of stuff, but it does really help people to understand that this is a multi-component approach, and it's good for them to understand how the system works.
I think before you got into the committees.
Oh, you're talking about
Yeah.
like the riverfront and yeah.
Story.
That is hugely important whenever you introduce an icon like this, because when it does not contain any literal images, then people feel disconnected from it. And the last thing that you want in your community is a disconnection from your community. So you have to be able to explain where it comes from, and then you have to be able to roll it out and implement it, because hopefully, and what a lot of people will tell me after they sit through a presentation like this is they'll say, well, when you first put it on screen, I didn't know how I felt about it. But once I saw how it worked, once I saw it in use with every slide, it started to feel more and more right. And that's the perfect answer. Like, it's not supposed to feel perfect when you see it the first time. And in fact, that litmus test is the thing that leads communities to adopt poor logos, because they end up over-explaining, putting in too many elements, putting in too many meanings, and then it doesn't end up conveying that the way that a graphic identity should. Couple side notes that have nothing to do with anything, but things that I always like to share when I notice them in a community. First of all, Toby, your building is awesome. And the cool little upstairs that's painted green, it's awesome. That is one of the, and I think one of the things, your building is awesome. There's a little super tiny building heading down to the depot across the street from you guys, and it's just it's where the maybe a new insurance agent just went in there. Now, the storefront that's in it is not good. It's just, it's panel board. The building itself is gorgeous. It's tiny, small frame, but it's got this amazing ceramic tile work, these 4 tile clusters with 4 different colors. Just really, really cool building. And honestly, one of the coolest physical places in downtown is the entryway into the Elks. You could imagine, and nothing against the Elks, but you could imagine that if there was like string lights running down that little corridor, and then something at the back of that wasn't the Elks, but but from a physical standpoint, it was like it felt like a place that I had kind of discovered, and it's like that's cool. So. Those are the little elements that I think are it's always kind of important to point it out. You guys have got amazing parking. The rear parking assets, I mean, it's this kind of weird because this is the second week in a row that I've done processes and haven't had people complaining about parking. But also the opposite side of that is our goal, if we are successful, is we want to make a parking problem, and we don't want to make a parking problem by taking away spaces. We want to make a parking problem by adding too many consumers. That's a good problem for us to have, but that was really, really cool. Getting a chance to go out and walk the river, you have that typical dynamic that I feel like I deal with a lot with industrial communities on the river, where it's like, we love the idea of the river. We hate the idea of getting in the river. We want to make sure that the river's clean. The dam removal project and the dam. I think all that stuff is going to be very interesting opportunities for you all to really take advantage of that resource. And then the only other thing that I wanted to convey, and I talked with Joel about a little bit, and I just want to throw it out there because I know the design committee is really helping to push with some of that riverfront redevelopment, and that's Farmer Street, isn't it? That runs right there. As you go through, one of the things that I noticed, and I just wanted to throw it out so that you were thinking about it as you started to finalize conceptual designs there. You have an entry point to the street, and then about 18 feet down, you have the entry point into the parking lot at the museum. And that dual entry point is, you're taking a whole bunch of space right there. And if you look around you, you've got the parking lot across the street, you've got the parking lot there. I think that there's an opportunity to continue on some of the rhythm of downtown. As you look at plans, I would ask you guys, just take a look if there is any way that you could close the entrance into the parking lot from Farmer, make the street right before it the primary entry point into the property as it's redeveloped, and then take some of your micro retail cluster that you're showing in there and push it out towards the street. So you can actually have more of a business connection and transition from your downtown into that Riverwalk development. So it's a really simple concept. It's something that you can kind of play around with. I think that I actually would even argue that if done well and the market was pushing for it, you could also reclaim the 10 spaces across the street in the front of that lot and do micro retail there. So you actually have like businesses on both sides of Farmer, but that would be down the road. But in closing that entry point, it would also increase capacity. I know that the lot at the museum's not really lined, and you can kind of just park in whatever hill, crack, or crevice you choose to. But, down the road, you could actually have parking that rode up right behind that. And so that's just something I like I say, I always like to share those things that kind of stick out to me. Is there anything that you guys were hoping that I would cover that I just didn't get to or I didn't touch on this morning? All right, well, let's talk real quick about next steps. Obviously, I've recorded the presentation. I'll be exporting that and uploading it, and hopefully, depending on internet connection, I'll be able to get you a link tomorrow, but it might be Friday before I'm able to get the whole thing uploaded because I've got to run on tomorrow. dig into it. I'll also save the presentation in the app and share it with Joel so he can circulate it around the board. As soon as you guys get to a point where you feel comfortable saying, hey, you know, we like where it's going, why don't you prep this thing up and get it to us. Everything that you see becomes yours. I'm going to save every single logo in 5 different file formats. You know, I had the typical experience of asking Joel for the logo and saying that he had a JPEG. And if that's the only tool you got, it's a good thing this is happening. Because believe it or not, JPEGs don't look good when you blow them up and put them on water towers and stuff like that. So we'll save them in 5 different formats so that you'll always have the tool that you need for the job. One of those is a PNG file. So those are the ones that you can use online, but they eliminate the white backgrounds, which can be problematic for folks. So we'll save all that stuff. I'm going to create a style guide document for you that will define all the colors, define all the typefaces, tell you how to use it, how not to use it. So literally it becomes this really nice self-contained package. And then from there, all that stuff will live online in our cloud server, and you can share that link with anyone. So if you're working with a vendor down the road, if you're ordering new banners, you can simply forward that link to them. They have access to the typeface, the color definitions, all the logos, and it removes that technical hurdle from the situation. And literally with this kind of stuff, I'll go through and I'll save the full color versions, and then I'll create several different one color versions so that you have a lot of different versatile tools in that toolbox. And then if in 6 months, I know one of the things that we talked about with promotions committee, and I didn't end up landing on what my recommendation would be, was we talked about Flip-Flop Friday and the fact that as we go through and we evaluate events, is that, you know, did that event do what we wanted it to do? Do we need to look at a different kind of event? I think that your community is in a somewhat odd spot where you don't have a whole lot of retail. And even though you've got some really great participation from some of your businesses, service businesses and things like that, it doesn't matter how much an insurance agency participates in an extended hours promotion of some type. It's not going to increase the number of times a customer goes in the insurance agency. Where a retail is really working on increasing loyalty and increasing visits. So you always want to think about that kind of that restaurant retail mix, and you just might not be at the density yet. As the new restaurant opens, you might, and if maybe you can get 1 or 2 more spaces filled, you might be at that point where now all of a sudden it makes sense. But I think one of the big things that I want to throw out to the promotion committee is good job at actually evaluating events, because it is amazing how often that doesn't happen. And Main Streets continue to do events year after year because that's what they do. And they don't actually ever have the discussion about effectiveness. So good job to even be able to address that. So
Ben, when would you like their comments back by, if they have any comments?
I would love it if we can get a set of refined comments from you guys in the next 2 weeks. That seems reasonable to you all. And then if that's the case, that would put us essentially at like the end of the 3rd week of October or so. And then that would set me up perfectly, because as we move into November, I can get it wrapped up and get it over to you in early November. And if you don't foresee that there are going to be any issues and you feel comfortable with, you know, the overall primary direction, and you think most of it is going to be smaller tweaks, then, you know, as soon as I get that overall direction, I can just start start cranking on the meat of it. So, all right, guys.
Water bottles with the logo on it.
Yeah, they cost $6,000.
Make those?
No, just for one. For one. Per.
First would cost that much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they are cool. They're very cool. And I mean, I saw one place that what they did was they created decals and they put the decals on the bottles. And so that they didn't have to worry about figuring out some sort of custom method of doing it. Whatever works for you to get them out there. That way you can kind of ease into it with smaller quantities.
Yeah, I like getting the logo on different.
Right.
Visible, at least.
Absolutely.
Nice to have it on coats or on.
Oh, my communities have started making a ton of hoodies. They're making some hoodies now. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Yep. Yep. Screen print. Yep. Yep. And the one there are two main ways that they do that, Ben. One is Sunbrella is kind of the industry standard on their fabric, and then they'll screen print. So you want to keep a relatively simple design because every ink will cost you more. The other one is a vinyl printed banner, and you can do as many colors as you want because they do kind of a full color process print on it. The vinyl tends to last a little bit. They don't last as long. You're in an interesting temperature zone, though, where I would be interested to hear what a vendor would say about vinyl here. In places where it gets super, super hot, the vinyl can actually sag in the summer, and then if the wind blows, it turns it into a nice sail, and that doesn't work really well. And then the worst thing in the world is these folks that spend all this money on banners, and then they decide they're going to cut wind holes in them, so they have like all these flaps running through this banner, and it goes from looking good to not looking good. I have a vendor out of New York that it's called Downtown Decorations. They present at all the national conferences. Ted Peterson there is phenomenal, and he's really, really good about helping people to know what they need. And so he's a good one to, and I can share that with you guys too. Any other questions? We have kept it under an hour and 15, which comes in much, much better than the 10:30 stop time. So